Recording in progress.
You were a little bit too early that time.
And I don't usually click the button.
That's a good point. That was a good point.
Like, does that help? I would say
multitasking.
Yeah.
I think it was like recording and recording. Like that was the kind of.
Okay, yeah.
It was
a proper big echoey room.
Yeah, if that helps for next time.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie.
You know what I should do? Because I had I think there was one episode where I said, I will listen to it back, and I was like, wait, no, I can't listen to it back because it's not part of the recording. I could record the audio on my phone of the recording, and then we could use it for ringtones and also as a way to work out how well we
I also have to say though, I think you two both care about this way more than I do and possibly anyone else does, but I love that it's making you both happy.
I'm happy.
Karen, it makes me problematically happy. Like when Dave says it and he gets really close, I'm like, Dave,
recording in progress.
But as I said, everything else is perfect. So the timing is still off, but you sound like the robot woman. It's perfect.
That's all I've ever wanted.
You sound like the robot woman in a perfect way, but just slightly late or early.
Yeah. Temporarily, I'm much less concerned. It's all about the quality of the voice.
Yeah, and the quality is it's aces.
Thanks,
Daves.
Thank you.
Aces of Daves.
Yay.
Anyway, what are we doing here, Karen? Why are you here?
So team, yeah, I know. I mean, I could leave you both to it, but
Don't Look Now, which is what the film's actually called. It's called Don't Look Now.
The same thing happened when it's because it's like an old movie, so when the title starts you get a lot of I always forget the words at the end but at the beginning.
The credits.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, so you get the credits at the beginning, but yeah, and it was like Don't Look Now, and I was like,
Don't Look Now.
What? I was like, Sophie, is that a direct quote in the movie? I don't think it is.
It isn't. And that's, how obsessed I get with misplaced quotations. Like, it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
And that when I was like, am I being overly judgy? But I had to rewind it to say to Dave, is this acceptable? Is this okay? Should this be? And I'm like,
they knew better in the 70s. They knew about quotation marks in the 70s.
Surely they did.
But Sophie, look, so I chose this. This was my pick for this week because I've seen it once before, I think in my early 20s with my parents. And all I could really remember from it, apart from the fact it freaked me out, was the epic sex scene and watching that with my parents. That was one thing I remembered. But I started watching it on my own and then managed to coax Dave into not actually doing his work and sit with me. And I did try really hard because, we keep talking too long about horror films. So I was like, maybe to help us, I will take some notes. And now looking at these notes, hilarious, not helpful at all, but I'm going to read some of my notes to you, Sophie, so that you can follow my logic until I clearly get bored of taking notes. So, I mean, I'm going to leave that one because that was your favorite bit. But start off, rain, all the, and then I go to idyllic, no rain. And then I go to Dave, horse. And then it goes amazing tash, amazing hair. I then have a little bit about didn't realize how much red raincoats trigger me. In fact, anything red in that film did trigger me. And then Venice, maybe travel. Ecclesiastical fuck about the church was another direct quote that I clearly enjoyed.
I enjoyed that one.
And then the other one was Venice in peril. How useful any of these notes are, I do not know. But there is one wonderful one that made me laugh a lot, but we'll get onto that because it was a Dave comment that just, it broke me. And I was like, I could be scared watching this film, but Dave is here and Dave is just making light of everything.
Not everything. I feel like I treated the movie with the gravitas that it demanded.
So look, that's my start. Again, of course, I can't hold thoughts in my head. So
the most important point I took from that was Donald Sutherland is in this film. Is his tash better or is his hair better?
Okay, my problem with and I love Donald Sutherland in almost everything he's been in. My issue with this is he looks like Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
And all I could see, and it's funny because so this one, I've seen as well, and this was one that I watched with JP years ago. So I also sat through the sex scenes with JP, and I have completely forgotten about either of our reactions. But I think there's that thing where you're both sitting there just staring at the screen, and you just I don't want to look. I don't want to stare at this, but I don't want to acknowledge the other person is also watching it.
Yeah.
So we'll both just sit here until like that bit is over. And yeah, I forgot about because it's because he's got a purple. So he's got his fro. So he's got his like curly like white man hair.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. And then he's got his like little scarf, which is like brightly colored. But I think it's because his like coat is purpley, and so every time he puts on a coat, and he's quite like slim as well, and it just the coat with the hair. All I saw was like every time was Willy Wonka, and it was every time that coat was involved. Distracting.
It was like he was missing his top hats the whole movie.
Like literally, it's like you put a purple top hat and we are watching a very different movie that also has a little person in it.
That's
I spoiled it. I spoiled the ending.
Yeah.
Who probably the little people in that scare me just as much as the little person in this film. So
I feel like we didn't really interact with little people in a super respectful way in the past in cinema, maybe.
No.
Or maybe current day. I don't know. So I don't know, do you want to see if my understanding is your attempt at writing those notes was to keep us more to time, Karen.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe we've now added time.
I think so, unless we want to stop at this point and go, that's Don't Look Now.
That's
Good
what
luck.
we saw in the movie.
Good luck, everyone.
I think like this one could be like summarized like pretty quickly. So it's like you got like a couple idyllic English countryside, one child accidentally drowns. Right, then they go to Venice because he like restores churches. They send the other child off to like boarding school, and then the wife meets these like two crazy English women who live in like Venice. One of them is blind and is a seer, can see the future things. Turns out Donald Sutherland might actually be one as well. Anyway, they just like get out of Venice because like you're in danger, and then he doesn't heed that advice, and then he keeps seeing all these like premonitions of his like small child, but it's actually like a tiny person in like a red raincoat who kills him.
Unfortunate. That is pretty much the movie.
Yeah, well done.
All right. End recording.
So the seer.
Yeah.
The seer is blind.
Yeah, she's blind and she
meets.
Sorry.
So the wife meets her. The wife meets her, and then
in a toilet.
Says, So they're having lunch together just after they get to Venice, and the Donald Sutherland, whose name escapes me in the film, and his wife, whose name also escapes me.
Oh my god, what are their names? I literally.
I don't know. I've got Wikipedia, so I should be
like Jack and Mary.
No, that's the actress. But
it could be Julie Christie. I mean, it's going to be Donald Sutherland.
No, it's John and Laura. It's the Baxters. Or the Basters.
Or the Baxters.
Or the Baxter, apparently, as the sign was, when she was picked up from the airport. Yeah. So yeah, John and Laura Baxter are having lunch in Venice. They're still clearly grief-stricken. Don't know how long it is after their daughter has drowned. And these creepy women are staring at them, or staring specifically, I guess, at John, or it appears to be, during lunch. And I find that whole scene very, very distracting because the sounds all around him are so loud. He's so attuned to everything in the kitchen, to the point where I was like, I can't hear dialogue. Am I supposed to, or is this part of the horror effect? I don't know. And then one of them gets dust in her eye, and Laura takes them to the toilet, which then cues them talking to her about her daughter.
Oh, I saw your daughter. I saw Christine. She was sitting between you. She was laughing. She was having a lovely time.
Yeah.
And then she's thoroughly convinced that these people have seen.
And it's because she knew about her raincoat, right? It was just like, she knew her name, she knew about the Mac, and she obviously knew that they had a newly deceased
Which, to be honest, like, they're English and she's English, so they both know that the other is English. So, I mean, it's a fair bet that if they had a child that would be wearing a raincoat, because.
But would it be red?
Bet. Well, they didn't say that.
Did they not?
No, they just said, and she's wearing a shiny Mac.
And she was
my gosh! You're right. They didn't specify the color, because I was going to say, well, yellow would be like a safer bet, maybe. But if they didn't specify color,
no.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Everyone in England needs a raincoat.
Yes.
That's dumb now. You're right, Dave. This movie is founded on nonsense.
So then the wife is thoroughly, Julie Christie is thoroughly convinced. I know she's got a name, but I don't care.
Laura.
Julie Christie.
What her name was?
Laura.
Julie Christie is thoroughly convinced and says,
JC.
This is my next issue, which is she goes to Donald Sutherland and says, oh, I met this blind woman, she's seen our daughter, she's got second sight. If you're blind, there's nothing second about it. It's just sight. It's just a different sight.
You've got one form of sight, but it's different from the traditional sight that both.
Yes, that's correct.
Sophie, my
There's
favorite.
nothing wrong with it, but you don't have two of them.
So, like, seriously, at this point, Sophie, this is the note I didn't read out because it made me laugh so much because Dave looked at me and went, second sight? Well, sight? And I lost it. I absolutely lost it. I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point. But anytime they referred to her having second sight, Dave just chuckled again because he was like,
because they doubled down. They doubled down on the second sight. And
it didn't even register for me, Dave. And to be honest, I'm glad it didn't, because I think I would have found that horribly distracting, because they do refer to it a bunch of times.
Yeah. Second sight.
Well, Sophie, you really miss out not watching these films with Dave, because, either his obsession about bad science or things not working quite right, or just, like technicalities like second sight, Dave's like, so that was one of his. The other one was the Venice in Peril that was appearing on Signs.
I enjoyed that.
He really liked that too.
He's there to restore this church, and on the side of the church it says Venice in Peril on the side, which I enjoyed very much. Because it brings to mind like a monster attack or
like a Godzilla type
tsunami or something.
Okay. Sure.
Not this church has fallen to bits, which is I think what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently I went to Venice one time, and apparently that's the whole fucking problem. It's like when you build a city on, a few foundations that are floating, turns out structurally problematic. Shit's crumble. It's gonna sink. Yeah. So I think it was in Peril in the 70s. But yeah, so meets the people. Also, but there's just like a couple of scenes of like those old women just like crazy laughing in a way that is very
it's terrifying. So that's, I think that's the thing about the film that I do think is very effective. We can't decide if they're allies or not, and that's what makes the film quite scary going throughout it, because ultimately there are some scary things happening around the storyline, like dead bodies are being uncovered.
There's a murderer.
So there is a murderer out there that they don't really talk about as much as you would imagine, but it's alluded to, and a couple of times they see bodies getting brought out of the water.
Like there's the one with the woman and the diver's got her, and then they literally tie her legs with a rope and just like winch her out of the water, feet first, in front of all these people. And I was like, is this how we do this? Is that how they get dead bodies in a super public, slightly grotesque way in Venice? I didn't Google it, but
I guess there must be a procedure, because presumably presuming that Venice is a major city with murders, there must be a lot of them chucked in the water.
I mean, you think that's the best way to get rid of it, right? Wave it down and throw it into a canal.
So there must be a procedure for getting them out, and I too would be astonished if that was it.
Or just like put up something, still winch her out by her feet in a really horrible way that doesn't seem to respect the person that much, but just put a sheet up.
Something.
Anything.
So returning to the old women, so Laura is clearly quite convinced by them from the start, and actually really gets comfort from them, because she's been grief-stricken and hasn't been herself, and then knowing that for all she can't see her daughter, that this woman with second sight or sight says that her daughter's around and seems happy, is really giving her a lot of comfort, and actually like restores her to something of her former self, which then leads into her reconnecting with Donald or John, and leads up to that very extended sex scene, which
then but that's like interlaced with then like the next, so it's kind of like you're watching two scenes at once, and then just like one of them is then being really like sexy, and like because there's this a bit even before that where Donald Sutherland is just sitting there naked for like an extended period of time, and I was like, good on you for the male nakedness, because how it's always like women these days in like movies that get their kid off. It's like you see his butt, you see everything but his dick for like 10 minutes. minutes, maybe not 10. But
Maybe not 10, but minutes. Yeah, a high single digit or a low double digit number of minutes.
Yeah, and then and then they
And
get,
and he sits naked to do his work for a wee while as well, and surprises the hotel
Was
staff.
that work? I thought maybe he was recreationally drawing.
Oh, I assumed it was to do with
I thought
the mosaic. I thought it was about, because he's trying to work on the beautiful arty mosaics in the church that he's recreating. I thought it was to do with that, but
maybe I don't know. I don't know how you restore a church.
No, I don't know.
So anyway, so I think for all, John is incredibly skeptical of the older women and isn't massively happy about them. In some ways, he's kind of accepting of it because Laura is feeling better, and that was necessary. And there's some commentary on her clearly having taken medication at some point to potentially for her grief.
In fact, she gets back on the gear.
She does get back on it.
She pretends to,
or she
slips the pill under her sleeve when she says she's going to take it after.
Oh, does she?
I hadn't realized that. So she
bit of emotional blackmail. Excellent.
So it then turns out these old women just seem to be everywhere that they are, and it's freaking John out, but Laura's quite happy about it, and then gets into big chats with them, and they talk about having whether they could speak to her daughter on her behalf or whatever, and could they essentially have a seance to get her in touch with them. And she really wants John to go with her, and he's like, no, this is ridiculous. But she decides to go, and then he's got that moment where he's repairing the church. She disappears to chat to them, and then I think some of this scene, I enjoyed these bits the most, although it was really bizarre and extended. But he ends up going drinking by himself in a little laneway kind of
cafe of the sort that Europe is famous.
Cafe with its beers.
Yeah.
And she goes on her own to see these older women that we're still unsure of, because they've turned up where he's restoring the church. They've turned up in another church that they visit. Like, they're just always around.
With a bit of manic laughing in that church.
Yeah.
Yes. And then when they're having this sort of seance type thing, there's a very graphic breast grabbing upset scene with the blind woman who is really having visions that are freaking her out. And again, there you're like, I don't know what's going on. Is it their daughter that they shouldn't have called back? Is she communing with the devil? Is she going to do something bad for Laura?
Why is she shout groping herself? Stupid stranger. Loud so her neighbors can hear.
For free, I think.
Yes. And then it keeps jumping between that and then and Donald Sutherland still drinking, but clearly getting more agitated himself, whether or not that is because he himself has second sight, or if he's just like, maybe I shouldn't have let my wife disappear with two strangers, irrespective if they are old English women.
Especially when there's like a murderer about, like. Yeah.
And then there's that really weird scene where he runs to their hotel. So he clearly knows where Laura is, or we think he runs there, and then bumps into someone who he keeps saying he's English.
Says English, he keeps saying English,
or he wants to speak English. I don't know. Which I got. Maybe you two can explain this bit to me, but this is where, I mean, it was all very overstimulating for me. This whole scene with jumping between them and the line, and then I couldn't understand what was going on there either, because Big John clearly could speak Italian.
A bit of Italian,
reasonably well, because
it was weird. I feel like in some scenes it seems like he was tripping over it, and in other scenes he seemed quite fluent. So I wonder if he was just more fluent in the work scenes because he knew all the words.
Work words.
Yeah, and the restaurant, he's good in the restaurant.
Yeah, and then otherwise he's not, because you're right.
Otherwise he didn't want it.
Because he was drinking, and then he always knows where the hotel is, because he goes into the hotel and is ringing a bell like a madman, and no one's coming to help him. And then he just like ends up like going up the stairs, and like, to me it seemed like he could hear because was she shouting John at one stage?
I thought she was shouting yes.
I swear she said his name.
She was going yes and doing this.
Was it anyway? But so it's like he could hear this craziness, And then, because that's right, because then the Italian guy comes out and is like what's going on, and that's when John starts being like English, 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 and then he's like leaving, and they're all like, dude, what, like, why is there a person shouting? You know, I think that's what I figured like the Italian guy's reaction was, because it's like there's someone shouting in a room and you're backing away, looking a bit weird, like something a bit untoward. I don't know.
It was a bit weird. I am the same. I feel like I didn't fully understand.
I didn't really get what was going on, but it did freak me out. And then, but John doesn't get in to see them.
No.
Goes back to drink, I think.
Because he meets her out the front not that long after, right? So he must have gone back to drink.
And then Laura, even as traumatic as all of that has been, Laura's still like, I'm still going with this. I still believe all of this. And says to John, like, you're in danger. The woman has said that like their daughter had come there to warn them that they need to leave Venice because John's in danger, which of course, understandably, John's like, that's ridiculous. What the hell? And then they're talking about what they should do, and I think that's when he says to Laura she's having a tough time and maybe she should consider going back on her medication.
Yeah, because it's like they go back and he's clearly drunk and she's like, are you going to be sick? And he's like, no. And then he goes and throws up, and then they have like a bit of an argument where it's kind of, she even almost like admits that like maybe she's getting into this in like too much of a way, and she could go back on the pills, and he was just like, and then he's like, they're over there, and then she goes, and then anyway, but then she picks it up and he walks out of the room and she slips it in her sleeve. She doesn't take it.
And that's not how pills work.
No,
you can't absorb the goodness via osmosis in the skin.
No, intrasleevular intrasleevular administration.
But and
then they get a phone call during the night, so they're still not very happy with one another, but go to sleep, whatever. And then it turns out that because I did at one point say to Dave, where on earth is their son? Because for some reason I also couldn't quite get the timeline, and I was like, so their daughter's dead and then they disappear without their son, what on earth is going on? And that's when Dave was like, they clearly seem very wealthy. They probably have a nanny. And then, of course, I should have figured
he restores churches.
In that restaurant, he was, you know, the first scene with the old people staring at them, she was writing a letter to the son at boarding school and was like,
I missed who she was writing to because I got so distracted by the creepy old women and all the sounds from around the restaurant that I missed a lot of that stuff.
The only bit that I got, the only time I realized that's what was happening, because she referred to like his sports shoes, and one of them rubbed, and I'm sending money, and like Mr. or Mrs. blah 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 will, you know. So then it was like, okay, and then it was like, maybe you could write like something to him. So so that's when they tell us that he's at the boarding school, but like in a not very direct way, whilst many other things are happening.
Too many things were going on for my brain, and so
but I even thought like, because even in that bit, you just like that kid just watched his sister die. Do we think we should be leaving him? Like, I know that we maybe weren't as aware of things in the 70s, but you're like, literally you just lost a daughter, but your son watched your daughter die.
And then watched
away to a school and leave the country, like what? And then watch you try to like,
and watch his dad try and save her. And then all of like, because the start of the film is I mean, for all I say, rain, all the idyllic, no rain. And then shortly after I wrote that, I didn't really write very much because I was so immersed in it's just such an amazing, upsetting opening scene where he is bringing her body out of the water and is so upset and like so grieved and just does such a great job. So anyway, so they got this call from some very, very English people from the boarding school.
What their last name? Oh, like Babington? Like, no.
Yeah, something like that. It was Babbage.
Yeah. So they just went, this is Venice, this is England, this is how we tell the difference. Pompous accents and Babbage is a surname. Like,
principal, I think, Mr. Babbage really did a job of explaining what was going on, so Mrs. Babbage had to take over and and actually talk about what was going on. So rather than continue to fight, and you know, Laura had wanted John to take a break because she was like, I need a break, you need a break, we need to just get away together, let's leave Venice. She leaves quickly, obviously, to go and see how her son is doing, and is like, will you not come? And he's like, well, can't leave so immediately.
And we should say she wants him to leave because the crazy lady, well, maybe not crazy lady, the lady who's grabbing her breasts,
Psychic lady.
the psychic lady. That's a good descriptor. The psychic lady.
You
None of the things I said.
Not crazy, not breast grabbing. The psychic woman.
The psychic woman, the allegedly psychic woman, who was grabbing her breasts. She says in the end, "Oh, John's in danger as long as he's in Venice."
Yeah.
So she, Julie Christie wants Donald Sutherland to leave Venice.
Yes.
Because
he's
in danger. She believes this lady, and she believes John to be in danger.
But because of this distraction with her son, she gets in the very
distraction
first
with this bloody
injured son. She gets on a plane without him, and he's left on his own in Venice, and continues to go about trying to do work at the church.
Okay, so that scene where like they go to the church and the priest has managed to get the little mosaics to fix the thing, and then he's up there, and it's like, so yeah, because the whole idea is he's in danger. He's got these pretty little mosaics, which to me look like tiny pieces of glass, but they're very good imitation old tiny pieces of glass, and he gets up on the little platformy thing, so he's high up on the wall so he can do this thing, and like there's a piece of wood that falls off a different scaffold through a glass thing, and it shatters, and the thing is like hanging off this. I have never seen in my life so many people not try hard to help a person. Like I know that's the point of the scene, because it's like he's hanging from a rope, and there's like one guy who's gone up on the scaffolding who's like has his arm out in the beginning, and then he gets like a stick that he's poking him with, even though he's like trying to get him in, and there's the priest just like walking around like this, and then everyone else is just shouting and running, but no one is actively trying to, because I was like, they were lowering him down, right? And then this thing happened. Could you not continue to lower him down while he's hanging? It was just like no one. It seems unnecessarily difficult to help this man.
I took it as sort of stunned shock. I'm not mass stunned shock. So like big, I was going to say Big John is up trying to look at the mosaic, and then this is very, very shortly after he's been told he's in danger in Venice.
And his wife is just left that morning, right?
Like, he's on the scaffolding by himself, and what is it that falls on him?
It's like
it's like a rafter.
Yeah, well, no, I thought it was like a plank of wood from another piece of scaffolding thing, because you just basically this plank of wood that comes down, and they have this, for some reason there's like a glass. Is it like a light? There's something there that basically it shatters the glass and then hits something and it cuts. Anyway, the whole thing is flawed. But yeah, it's just
and like I think
falls at him.
For me, again, like the really prolonged sex scene that I guess is establishing their rekindling of something that hadn't existed for a while. I felt like with this, it was a really long scene of him dangling, which I found particularly effective because it was incredibly stressful. It was incredibly stressful watching that and them not really knowing what to do, and him gripping on for dear life, but clearly not being, the best at the rope climb, either up or down. So was just clinging.
Well, we've seen his upper body.
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't look like.
No, he doesn't look like he was.
I'm not saying that I would be amazing at climbing.
I was crap at like the rope climb at pre, so I'm not judging. I'm just saying he was kind of stuck.
Yeah, he doesn't look like any rock climber I recently saw in the Olympics. You know what I'm saying?
And
his hair's too nice.
And then you're right. It was like they were trying to catch him, but it all looked really ineffective, like prodding him with a stick. So almost to make him spin more. I
thought they were putting swing on him.
So yeah,
so that he would swing back the other way.
Oh, I thought the idea was so he could grab it with one hand and they could pull him in, or they were going to scoop him in, or so. Anyway, I
just thought they were going to just bat him off and go, oh well, he's done for. Let's just get him off the rope.
I thought they were making him a pendulum. I thought it was a bold gambit.
Yeah, I did.
To make him a pendulum by shoving him away with a massive.
Also, there was no explanation that that's what they were trying to do either. So it was just we're just going to push him.
That's what I mean. They were just shouting and people running and then sticks and things and people basically just what is this? How are we? What is going on?
Particularly given that the Italian for pendulum is probably pendulum.
You'd have to think something like that. Yeah.
And so they do save him.
And shouts pendulum.
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 Where are you?
Oh, your audio's gone.
Now.
Oh yeah, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, you're back. It wasn't even me this time, right?
Okay, I think
So-
we're back in business.
So he's safe. It's all good. Nothing untoward happens to him apart from clearly a massive scare. But decides that he wants to go for a bit of a walk. And the I was gonna say priest, bishop, I don't know.
He's who's the big in charge priest? But yeah, I called him a priest.
The formal Catholic.
Yeah. So they go for a walk
The
together.
ordained one.
The ordained one, whose father had happened to die in a falling accident.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. That's why, and then I was like, okay, that's why he just floundered around on the ground. I thought that was explained his behavior, but none of the other work.
Yeah. There was nothing there. And yeah, so.
And then that's when they see the poor woman get hoisted out of the. We said they needed to cover the
Which of course is incredibly, even more incredibly traumatic for John, because he'd already, had his near-death experience himself, was thinking about the fact that these women had foretold his death, and then was having flashes to his own daughter drowning and being pulled out of the water while this potentially murdered woman is being brought out of the water. So there's a lot of crap happening to him.
He started seeing, by this point, a small figure in red.
And do you know what I think is really interesting, and it shows just how effective they are with really minor moments of that, is my recollection of this film was a lot more of the glimmers of red around Venice. There's actually hardly any of it.
It's like what, 2 or 3? So I agree. I think you go, Don't Look Now. That's the one in Venice with Donald Sutherland and like the tiny like red figure all the time. And you're like, you're right. It's like not that many times.
And I think what's done so effectively is the use of red that makes you think it's happening more. So like the first time it occurs is early on when he's trying, I think after they had sex, he and his wife are trying to go out for dinner and they get lost in Venice. And then they hear a weird sound. So the other thing about this film, it's full of kind of weird sounds that are sometimes like cats or babies crying or whatever, and they appear at really strange times. And so they're lost and he sees this glimmer of this red coat, and that's quite early in the film. And then you don't really get much else, but occasionally you'll maybe see a glimmer of red on, maybe in a window or on a washing line or so, I don't know, but like anytime you see a bit of red, I think it triggers that memory for you. So even though you don't see that much, it kind of makes you think about the start of the film where his daughter in the red raincoat drowns. And so he's already had those moments. And then he is on a boat and he sees Laura go past on a boat.
Because
on a funeral barge.
Yeah, so it's like they're getting kicked out of the hotel because everything closes down for winter. So it's like he's sorting all of his shit, and then the idea is he's then going to go get his like flight eventually. But and so he's like, it's it's Laura and the 2 women on a funeral barge, and you're like, what? Because then he's like, wait, she left this morning.
Yeah.
Why is she here? Is she here against her will? Did she get kidnapped by these old women?
And so he goes to the police station to try and resolve all this, because of course we don't have mobile phones in the 70s, and so everything's really challenging. And and then we get to so Sophie, when we love in a horror when Dave rewinds things to watch again and again.
There's this bit where he goes in to see the police captain or whomever it is, and his face is hidden behind this really big 70s lamp, and it's like, this must happen every single time someone comes into his room, but the lamp is positioned such that it's like that. And in order to see who's come in, he has to go, hello. And that's what he does. Like Donald Sutherland walks into the room and you get this, hello. And it's like, why have you put a lamp there? Why have you done this?
Of all the places to put a lamp, could you not have picked a more practical one?
And can you not deal with the problem now that you've instated it in a less hilarious way?
Yeah, it was...
Hello.
It was really, really funny. It was really funny. So we had to keep like rewinding that because I guess it was a light moment in
a light moment.
Quite tense scene.
Yeah.
So then because there's also like that whole bit where they're trying to get a photo fit kind of drawing of these like the 2 older women because he believes they've kidnapped his wife. And then there's that weird chat that they have in the office where like the police chief is just like,
Old-
don't old women just look the same?
They all look the same.
All
The older
older
they
women.
get. Yeah, the more they look the same. And then Donald Sutherland's like, oh, yeah, haven't noticed.
Yeah, because he was like,
what?
Yeah. And he really goes for it. It's like men, they become more individual, but women, they converge.
Yes.
And it
They
was
converge
really
into
like
one great big superwoman.
a giant old woman who has just a face that you couldn't recognize because it's
Couldn't
like every
place
other
it.
face you've ever seen.
Oh,
But
it's just a
also, like-
classic old woman.
He's looking at these two pictures of sisters. I mean, you would expect them to
They
look
look
the
similar.
same.
Yeah.
Not like
Yeah.
all old women are the same.
Yeah.
But maybe they
These
are.
ones
Maybe
share
they just
genetic
converge.
material, like, yeah, for sure.
But clearly he doesn't really believe Big John that that anything has happened, but kind of goes along with it, but also says things that are quite sensible. Like, did you like check with the airline that your wife got on the flight? And also things like, did you phone the boarding school? Did you do
Yeah,
the thing
like, yeah,
that
like,
you were
sure.
supposed
And,
to
you know,
do?
even and something like, surely if she's back in Venice, she'll try to contact you, like all this stuff, like, and then that's when it's like, oh, it might be against will. But yeah, you're right, like, he says sensible things, although my perception, I don't know if it's true, is like, you know, when like they leave and he gets the guy to follow him, like, to me that's more like we think he's the suspect, he's the person
Yes,
murdering
yeah, yeah.
everyone. That's right,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So because that's the thing, the police dude says to him that he's essentially not trying hard enough himself to find the older women.
Yeah,
because
go
he's
back
like,
to the place and
they were in this hotel, and he's like, where was it? And he's like, I don't know. And that makes sense because he was so blind drunk that night that maybe he just doesn't know. And so he's like, I've been wondering, I've been trying to do it. And he's like, well, we'll try harder, essentially. Go try harder. And you're right, that's when the detective is then following him, because you know, I mean, commonly if something happens to a woman, like the first assumption is it might
it's
be
always the
right,
husband.
the
You
partner.
guys to all my true crime bullshit, and like fucking 9 times out of 10, it's the husband.
Yeah. So
the
I mean
mother.
that's fair enough. Following him and seeing what the hell is going on, but then he does eventually find the hotel again, but the women have gone. They've gone. And they've also moved on to another hotel, which still makes us as the audience go,
Yeah,
what the
like,
hell? Like,
why?
have they been
Yeah.
messing with him? Do they have his wife, whatever?
Because
But
yeah,
then-
this isn't a hotel that closes down for the winter. Like they just left,
just gone.
and you're like, that's strange. Like based on like the timeline of events, for sure.
And then he does eventually call the boarding school. And his
Yeah,
wife-
when
his
he goes
wife
to
is
meet
there.
the church guy, and he has to fill out a form to make a call to England, but then he finally calls like the
Yes.
boarding school, and then like talks to matron Babbage, and then to his wife, but then is so confused by everything that he just continuously asks her where she actually is, and she actually just like evades the question the whole time. I mean, she doesn't. At one stage, she goes, "I'm at the boarding school," and then
I
after
remember.
that, he's just
Dave-
like,
I found that whole interaction so stressful.
It was really funny. That was another point watching Dave, who's like, that was just a horrendous phone call. That was just useless. Like,
yeah. 'Cause,
But
yeah.
all we get from that very frustrating phone call is that luckily their son's okay, he's fine.
Yeah.
And Laura's planning on coming back to Venice that night to check on John and to resume their nice time in Venice. And she
Even
seems just
though
much more upbeat than when she left. So
I was gonna say, the bit that confuses me was like the whole point was then at some stage John was going to also leave Venice because they'd already established pre-son getting hurt that like they should have a holiday. I was like, why is she coming back? Why don't you just wait for him? He's leaving soon. But anyway, yeah. So and they're gonna have a late dinner. That was the other thing they established. Once she got back in, they would have a late dinner. Yeah.
So yeah, he then goes back. He goes to the police station. To sort of say, actually, I found my wife, and that's where he discovers that
They arrested the blind woman.
Yeah, they've arrested, I think, both women, and so the blind
Yeah, and then
woman,
the other one had. Where's the other one? They'd
Went
arrested
to the
both
British
of them.
consulate.
yes,
That's right. Sorry. Yeah.
So then John is very apologetic and was like, oh yeah, it's like oopsie, and the blind woman asks if he'll escort her back to their hotel, which he does, as he should, and
Them arrested for not doing anything.
yeah, and then he gets her back to the hotel where her sister is.
Yeah,
Yes.
the sister's already there. Yeah. Which was odd because you think after the sister had been to the consulate, she didn't know that John was going to appear and bring her back. So you would have gone straight back to the police station, not the hotel.
Yeah. And on the way back to the hotel, they kind of have some chit chat, and you're kind of left with the impression, although it's not made avert, you're left with the impression that maybe John's a bit more amenable to this whole psychic kind of thing. You kind of get the impression that he's
which I think
starting to come on
but
board.
I feel like it's almost like he thinks he's survived the danger that he was in, because he didn't die in the church. So it's almost like their premonition that something would happen in Venice was true, but he's fine. Like,
it's fine. Like, he got over it. Yeah,
he got over it, and now it's just a case of as long as Laura's okay, we're okay. But then our sister, our blind psychic sister, has visions again and is like, this is terrible. But John disappears from the hotel, and just after he goes, she sends her sister saying, you need to get him back, he's in terrible danger, go fetch him. And she can't find him, but at that moment Laura arrives to go to the hotel because she'd gone to the police station.
So it's like the boat that picked her up was meant to take her somewhere, and then ends up taking her to the police station because like that's where he was. And then by the time she gets to the police station, they've gone, and then gives her the address of like the old people's hotel.
I had to really constantly remind myself during this whole sequence, and this was one of several sequences in the film where I had to actively remind myself. They just didn't know. People just didn't know where everyone was all the time. Yeah. Like, because like now we do. Like now you'd be texting people from the airport and text people on the plane and text people when you land. And now, this was just not. Just people just didn't know where everyone was all the time. They just didn't fucking know.
And also, it was that thing of like, she's arrived back at the airport, going back to Venice where there are murders happening. And a man picks her up, and then she's getting escorted, but then he doesn't take her to where she thinks she's going. And she went, hey, hang on. And it's just like, like a woman traveling on her own without a means of contacting someone, you can't text on the boat. It's just like, all right, so I just have to try and go somewhere and then rely on you to take me to where I think you're taking me. So then she gets sent after her husband, knowing that he's in danger, but he spots this figure in red, and again, not for, maybe only the second, possibly third time or something in the film. But
I think it's the third time, I reckon. But that's not a lot for a 2-hour and whatever movie.
Yeah.
For all it's a duffel coat and not a Mac. Is convinced, it's a red coat, same. Convinced that it might be his daughter, I assume.
Question. So if that's true, because I believe that was my interpretation as well. But for the first, for all of their interactions, except for the last one when he's chasing her, he's speaking to her in Italian.
I don't know. I didn't even notice that.
So if he believes it's his daughter, why is he speaking to someone he believes is his daughter in Italian?
In Italian. Unless they all spoke fluent Italian, except him.
Maybe they did. Maybe it was
sometimes.
You're absolutely right. Maybe it was just a thing.
No, but I didn't notice that. But that is odd now that you brought it up.
Because again, even so, I've of course got my Wikipedia up, and it was like he believes that it's his child. That's what someone else interpreted on Wikipedia.
You've got to assume that, right? Because otherwise, why is he following a person in a red coat?
Yeah.
And this bit was all super effective, where he's chasing her through the streets of Venice at this point, and it's all very like classic haunted housey. It's all like dry ice, smoke on the ground, and like these really creepy patterns being made in it by their footsteps, and wandering through these kind of amazing dark sets.
And then jumping.
Sorry.
So I was just saying, jumping back to Laura as she's continuing to try and find her husband, and the panic from her. So it's like jumping between him and the red to her and going, John, where are you? And like not being able to catch up with him. So I thought that bit I do remember very, very well from seeing it the first time, and how stressful you are watching that, going, I know something bad's going to happen to this dude, and I know she's not getting there in time. Done beautifully.
I was just going to say, like, I always wondered if that movie would be as effective if it was like filmed somewhere else, like, because you really think, especially in that scene, you need the kind of, you've got the narrow and the dark and the like little alley things, and then like you go through a little arch, and then like it's just, yeah, I feel like that is incredibly effective.
It wouldn't be the same in like Ballarat.
No,
or, you know,
too much open space, you know.
yeah.
I also, to me, I felt the setting was so important because water is such a big feature of this film, of the whole story.
Yeah.
You know, because as I say, even I know I laughed at the say rain Alda, but like rain is punctuating emotions at points throughout the film. And then you've got the water at the start with the drowning, and then you've got people pulled out the water, you've got baths, you've got like, it's a very wet film. It's a very, very wet film. And I also feel like not being in Venice, it wouldn't be so effective, because I also questioned at the start of the film, I was like, your daughter has drowned.
Yeah, why did you go to
the places to go?
Yeah, the city made of water.
Venice? Like,
yeah, I agree. I did
water
the same thing.
everywhere. But then I think that also is what makes it so effective, because water is such a scary element of this film.
Yeah. And then what happens, Karen? And then what happens?
And then what happens? So then I got quite upset and I struggled to watch this bit, because I still, like, even having watched it like, I was watching it like that.
Oh, Karen, I love it.
Yeah, I find this film very scary. So yeah, then it turns out he discovers too late that the person he's following, the red-coated small person, is not actually his daughter.
No, that he's been chasing just for,
but rather a scary dwarf with a blade.
Yes.
Who then hacks his neck.
And all I can say is that blood does not pass the real fake blood test. It is some of the worst fake blood I've ever seen in my life. It is
very painty blood.
It's very bright and a little bit too opaque.
Yes, agree. Although I really love the shot. There's this great shot of when he has the confrontation with the murderer. He's in this kind of strange situation where there's an archway, but then there's a floor almost all the way up the archway. So when he's ultimately killed, his foot ends up sticking through the archway and there's blood dripping down it. And it's just a really, really effective, awful image. With the blood dripping down, I thought was really.
No, I totally agree.
I was more like the consistency of the blood was a problem for me, but I agree. It was quite effective. It was very
quite
good.
Pink.
It's like poster paint for children, is what it was.
Yeah, it was like strawberry milk.
And then it turns out, so we return to essentially the scene with the funeral barge, with Laura and the two older women and her son, and it turns out that actually John's seeing his wife was a premonition of his own funeral, which happened to take place in Venice.
Because he does have the second sight, not the first sight.
Not the first sight, not a sight. He
has the second sight. And I think. That was it. The film. Yeah. I really liked that film. I know you were unsure, but you were letting it percolate. But I really liked watching it again. I probably wasn't as scared as the first time. I really was super, super tense the first time I watched it, and that was on like a Saturday afternoon with my folks. Like, but I think it's a really well done film where it's just lots of tension. I have to suspend my disbelief at times, but again, this is 70s Venice. But you see all the stuff now about how overly, maybe not during a pandemic, but overly populated Venice is with tourists. And I keep watching it going, how is so much of Venice is empty? Like this is crazy.
Although having said that, I've been to Venice once and it was in the dead of winter, and Venice does like shut down in winter. Like there weren't that many, like, because it's cold and it's windy and it's fucked. So you know how like his hotel like shut down for the winter. I think that's like a genuine thing, because when we went there were people around, but there were not very many people for such, like, apparently it's pumping in the summer and just like real slow in the winter. So that granted it was probably like a little bit too real slow, but like that's definitely a thing, at least from the one time that I went to Venice many years ago.
So I mean I just also, having never been to Venice, thought it was beautiful. Like, so I think I love the visuals of this film. I enjoyed the acting. I enjoyed the relationship between Laura and John. I enjoyed the opening scene. I did probably find on a rewatch the scenes with the sisters were a little bit much at points, even like the crazy raucous laughter. I was like, but saying that, it was really effective in me, and still putting that doubt in your mind of, are these crazy women that are leading Laura astray? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But no, I like it. I would watch it again. Yeah.
I think, yeah, I really like the movie. But I wonder if the problem is, I wonder if my opinion of the movie is also slightly colored by Dad, because Dad really likes Don't Look Now. And if the previous time, I think I've only seen it once or twice before, and it would have been with him. And I know he's a fan. And then as a result, I wonder if like, no, but that's not true, because, you know, there's a lot of movies that I liked in the past. I came back and watched again and went, these are fucking awful. Whereas this one, I still really did. I think I really like it. I think it's like, it does have its problems. But then, yeah, I think like on average, I very much like this movie, and I would like happily watch it again.
I like the movie. I think this is my second watch of the film. The first time I watched it, I was maybe 16 or 17, I think. So I didn't remember it that well. I think for me, I just struggled with the age of the film. There were some things about the film that aged it quite a lot. One was, one was that like some of the vocal dub was a little bit old, and yeah, just some of the circumstances, I was kind of lifted out of the film a little bit, because I was like, I had to remind myself that these situations that people found them in were very specific to the time. But having said that, like, you can, looking at the film and looking at all the elements of the film, you can see that it's really thought out, and that it's really clever and really put together. So I guess it kind of it didn't quite coalesce for me as a viewing experience, but I can see that all the elements are 100% there, I guess.
And I wonder if like I've got like a bit of a wanky penchant for a slightly older film anyway. So I think to me, I just see that as like a bit, like I think I've just watched so many old things that you just get used to exactly what you said. Like it did, it didn't like age well, and it has all these like slightly strange things. And I'm like, it's a classic. I can justify it in my head because it's a classic.
I also have a question for you, Sophie, with regards to this film. So do you speak Italian?
I can understand a bit of Italian. I don't, if I know the word in Italian, I can make a sentence, because I say it in my head in French, and then I replace it with Italian words. But I like I can understand like a bit of Italian.
Because I think the other thing I find really effective in this film is there's so much in Italian that, of course, I don't understand. I don't speak any Italian. And I think that also adds to the element of danger in the film, because particularly Laura, who clearly doesn't speak any Italian, and he, who may or may not speak Italian, but clearly when he's drunk can't speak Italian well.
Which is the opposite for me. If I'm drunk, I lose all inhibition, and I can speak French fluently. But like, if I'm not drunk, I get really self-conscious. It's like, I can't remember that word. That's not the right structure. I don't know what I'm doing, and I just rather not talk to anyone. So that is, I don't relate to that at all, Donald Sutherland. You should be better.
And so I think what's interesting too is watching so much of a film where you don't understand really much that's going on also adds, as I say, the element of danger, and also the feeling of how isolated they are, because they're so dependent on other people being able to speak English to them at points.
Whereas, I wonder, because there were still things that they said, like there was some stuff that was said in Italian that I understood what had been said, but then a lot of those bits, I guess that was like the simpler Italian, and then it was often like then reiterated in English anyway. So like in the first bit when like they're in the boat, and then she's like, did they say, like, I heard him say like blah, blah, homicide, and she's like, oh, did they say homicide? And I was like, I knew that word, but like it was, so I wonder. And also I did in the very beginning when I turned on, I like just the subtitles were on automatically, so then I realized that a lot of the Italian, they, not all of it, but they subtitled a lot of the Italian, but in Italian, like not in English.
Oh, okay.
And then I was like, if it's actually written down, it turns out that I speak far more Italian than I realized. And then I found that I was getting distracted, because I was like, do I know this in Italian? And I was like, turn off the subtitles and just, if you hear the word that you know it, and if not, no. Just walk away.
Because that's the thing, again, so I'd forgotten that this was one of the things that I got confused about, because I was like, should we have had subtitles on or not? But actually, if you do flick through the discussion of the film on Wikipedia, they do say it was a deliberate choice to not
Yeah.
have subtitles, so that again it was, I guess, I guess my question was, I wonder if someone speaks English and Italian, if it's
like
less
properly,
effective, because you don't feel the
as
tension
there's
so
like
much.
there's because you're right, because there was a huge portion of the dialogue that's in Italian. And the thing that I actually noted, I was actually thought about it at the time, I was like, because having watched, being in lockdown, watching like a lot of crap movies all the time, I've just seen this like spate of movie, like British or like American movies with like the worst Australian accents I have ever heard in my life. Or even like I'm watching Lost with Evan, and like the fucking French woman in Lost is not a French woman, so you hear her speaking English with a French accent. But I was like, that's not a French accent. That's not how a French person speaks English. And looked it up, and she's like some other European. And I was like, back in the day where they went, let's get Italians to speak Italian. And I was like, what a novel idea. And I just it was actually almost joyous, because it's like, I've watched so many things. It's like, why do we have to get the crap American to do like the Australian accent? Why do we need to get the Romanian to be like the French person? Can we not just, and it's not to say that people can't do accents, because Dave, for example, you do very good accents, but it's like, either get someone to do a good accent or get a person of like the ethnicity, whatever you're trying to represent. But I was just, I got a little bit angry about that, thinking of Lost. But I loved it. I was like, Italian speaking Italian, because it sounds like Italian. Like, this is what Italian people sound like speaking Italian. And like, I like that. And it also, it added to the, I don't know what's going on around me. And it's all a bit, it's like you're not privy to the story, right?
Yeah.
A little bit.
For sure.
Yeah, it's like, am I missing some things here? So anyway, I think generally speaking, quite good choice.
I'm glad we rewatched it, actually, because I don't think it would have just like come up for me to go like, oh, actually, I might like watch that again after 15 years. But I'm glad you suggested it.
We did it. So what's next? Whose turn is it?
Is it you, Sophie, or is
it must
Dave?
be me? Do you know, I was thinking,
because
I don't even, we don't need to look at the sheet, because I was thinking it was the conversation that we had the other week where I'd been talking about A Tale of Two Cities, and then Dave messaged us all being like, hey, has anyone seen this movie? And I was like, I literally talked about it last week and when we were picking. Why don't we watch, not The Tale of Two Cities, The Tale of Two Sisters. Not The Tale of Two Cities. It's a very different thing.
Yeah, that's very different. I was like,
very different.
Horror?
I was thinking, because it's either, because otherwise I've got some older ones. We did older last time, and then the only other ones, this is me trying to remember the things that I've written down off the top of my head. There was like The Lodge, which is a slightly newer one, but I say we leave that, and I say like, let's go to, let's do like The Tale of Two Sisters, because that one also I have not seen.
If A Tale of Two Cities was a horror, would it just be, it was the worst of times, the end?
Yeah, like, I'd be like, it was the worst of times. No, seriously, the worst.
Yeah. It was the worst of times for about 90 minutes. The end.
Like, ideally. Let's do.
Okay, let's do that. I'm prepping myself for it being quite scary, given your pals.
Well, I think it is meant to be, and I think it's meant to be quite good. I hope. And so, as I said, this is one where like I have not. It's not even like I haven't seen it, and then we go to watch it, and I was like, oh, actually, I did watch this like a really long time ago. I think I hope it's not one of those. I think I genuinely haven't seen it.
I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, I think it'll be good regardless. I think that will be my choice. Sophie's choice, without sacrificing any children.